A woman who devoted her life to sacrificing for her son is met with the cruel indifference of the person she loved the most. After years of hard work and dedication, an event forces her to make a decision that will change her life forever. Her fight for dignity begins when she least expects it. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching us from. We continue. I promise this will be the best story you'll ever hear in your life. Mrs. Mary Jane always woke before sunrise. At 73, her body no longer had the same vigor as before, but the routine was so ingrained in her soul that it would be impossible to change. That June morning, in her small apartment in the Islington borough of London, she got up carefully so as not to wake anyone. The house was silent, only the distant rumble of the first buses on the avenue broke the quiet of dawn. She walked to the kitchen, her steps soft on the cold floor. She began to prepare coffee as she always did, with that meticulous way she had learned from her mother so many decades ago. As the water boiled, Mary Jane looked out the window and saw the city beginning to awaken. The streetlights still glowed faintly against the slowly lightening sky. So many years in that house, so many memories kept in every corner. Her only son, Gabriel, slept in the room that had once been his as a child. Now at 35, he had returned home 3 months ago, after his girlfriend accepted his marriage proposal. The explanation had been simple. It was temporary, just until they could save enough money for their own apartment. Mary Jane had accepted without question, as she always did. After all, what mother would deny shelter to her own son? As she strained the coffee, memories came in inevitable waves. She remembered little Gabriel running through the living room with his toy cars. She remembered the nights he studied late, and she would stay awake preparing snacks. For him, Mary Jane had worked her entire life to give her son what she had never had. She spent years as a domestic worker, laundress, ironer. Then, when Gabriel went to college, she sold savory snacks at the market on Sundays, saving every penny to pay the tuition fees that the partial scholarship didn't cover. The sacrifice had always seemed natural to her. It was what mothers did, she thought, giving up their own dreams so their children could fly higher. Mary Jane never bought new clothes for herself, always preferring to spend on Gabriel's notebooks and books. She never took a trip, never allowed herself a single luxury. Everything was for him, it always had been. The sharp voice of Patricia, Gabriel's fiancée, invaded her thoughts. The young woman appeared in the kitchen, still in her bathrobe, with that expression of someone who had just woken up and was already annoyed about something. "Good morning, Mrs. Mary," Patricia said, but the tone was anything but cordial. "Good morning, my dear. I've already prepared coffee. Would you like me to make you a toasted sandwich?" Patricia rolled her eyes in a way Mary Jane pretended not to notice. "No, need. I'll just have coffee." The two remained silent while Patricia poured her cup. Mary Jane felt the tension in the air, that heavy energy that had settled in the house since the young woman began frequenting the apartment more regularly. Patricia was different from everything Mary Jane had imagined for her son. She came from a more affluent family, had studied in private schools, and had a way of speaking and behaving that made it clear she considered herself superior. "Mrs. Mary, have you thought about tidying up the living room? It's all very cluttered, very old. When we get married and come to live here, it will need a modernization, you know." Mary Jane felt her heart clench. "When we come to live here." The words echoed in her mind like a distant alarm. Gabriel had promised her years ago that when he married, she would always have a place in his house. But now, hearing Patricia speak that way, as if the apartment was already hers, Mary Jane began to feel an uneasiness she couldn't name. "I'll see what I can do," she replied softly. Patricia left the kitchen without another word, taking her coffee cup. Mary Jane stood there looking at her still full cup, unable to drink. Something inside her was beginning to stir, an awareness she preferred to keep dormant. Was she being foolish? Was she imagining things? Gabriel appeared minutes later, already dressed for work. He was handsome, Mary Jane thought with maternal pride. Tall, dark hair, neatly combed, light eyes he had inherited from the father she barely knew. The man who had abandoned her when she was pregnant decades ago, and of whom she had never heard again. "Mom, good morning, thanks for the coffee." He kissed her cheek quickly and grabbed a piece of toast. Mary Jane watched him as he ate hastily, looking at his phone. "Son, can I ask you something?" Gabriel looked up, impatient. "Speak, Mom, but quickly, I'm late." "It's about the house. Patricia said that when you two get married, you'll live here." "Yes, Mom, we talked about it. It's the most practical for now. That way we save up to buy our own place." Mary Jane felt her throat dry. "And me, son, where will I stay?" Gabriel seemed surprised by the question, as if the answer were obvious. "You'll stay here too, of course. There's space. You can stay in the small back room. It's smaller, but it's comfortable." The small back room, the old storage room that barely had a window, where she kept old boxes and winter clothes. Mary Jane felt something break inside her chest, but she forced a smile. "Ah, yes, of course." Gabriel was already leaving when he turned back. "Oh, Mom, I forgot to tell you. Tonight we're bringing some of Patricia's friends over for dinner. Can you make your lasagna? They'll love it." And he left without waiting for an answer. Mary Jane was left alone in the kitchen, the coffee already cold in her cup. She looked around at that kitchen where she had spent so many years preparing meals, where she had taught Gabriel to make chocolate fudge balls, where she had cried in secret on difficult nights. Everything seemed the same, but something had changed, or perhaps she thought something had always been wrong, and she just hadn't wanted to see it. The day passed slowly. Mary Jane went to the market to buy ingredients for the lasagna, spending part of her small pension. She returned carrying the heavy bags, climbing the 3 flights of stairs because the elevator was broken again. At home, she began to cook, her experienced hands working automatically while her mind wandered. She thought of all the times she had said yes when she wanted to say no, all the times she had swallowed resentment to avoid conflict, all the times she had made herself small so that others could feel big. When had this started? Had it always been like this? Or was there a specific moment when she decided that her life was worth less than others? That evening, when Gabriel and Patricia arrived with their friends, Mary Jane served the lasagna at the table. There were 5 people besides the couple, all young, all well-dressed, talking loudly and laughing at jokes she didn't understand. She stayed in the kitchen, eating a small plate alone, listening to the conversations in the living room. That's when she heard Patricia's voice louder than the others, probably thinking Mary Jane couldn't hear. "Guys, I know the house is a bit old, but after we get married, we're going to renovate everything. Mrs. Mary is a good person, you know. A bit old-fashioned, but she doesn't get in the way too much." The laughter that followed made Mary Jane close her eyes tightly. Doesn't get in the way too much. As if she were an old piece of furniture that could be tolerated, as if her presence in her own home was a concession. She slowly got up, washed her plate in silence and went to her room. She lay on the bed, still dressed, looking at the ceiling. Tears didn't come, though she felt they should. Only a deep emptiness, a feeling that something precious had been lost a long time ago, and she had only just now realized its absence. Outside, the laughter continued. Life went on, indifferent to the silent pain of a woman who had given everything and now saw herself as a nuisance. Mary Jane closed her eyes, but sleep didn't come. Only unanswered questions, circling in her mind like lost birds. When had everything changed? When had her son learned to look at her with such indifference? When had she become invisible in her own home, in her own life? And more importantly, she thought in the darkness of the room, how much longer would she accept being treated like this? The following days were a repetition of the same painful pattern. Mary Jane woke early, prepared coffee, cleaned the house, made meals, and watched as Gabriel and Patricia lived their lives as if she were part of the furniture. The invisibility hurt more than any cruel word could. It was as if she had become a ghost in her own house, present but irrelevant. One Thursday afternoon, while Mary Jane was folding clothes in the utility room, she heard Patricia's phone ring in the living room. The young woman answered with that lively voice she reserved for her friends, so different from the dry tone she used with Mary Jane. "Hi, Claudia. How are you, friend? You can't imagine the day I've had." Mary Jane didn't want to listen. She really didn't want to, but the utility room was near the living room, and Patricia's voice was loud, impossible to ignore. She continued folding clothes, trying to concentrate on smoothing each piece perfectly. "Oh, don't even get me started. It's really a challenge living here with my mother-in-law, you know. Mrs. Mary is a good person, poor thing. But she's one of those old ladies, you know how it is. She's always circulating around the house all day, making noise early in the morning. And she has such weird habits." Mary Jane felt her hand stop in the middle of a fold. Her heart began to beat faster. "No, she's not bad, she's just old. You know how women her age are, right? They're always complaining about something, always with that martyr face, but look, it's temporary. As soon as we finish the renovation and get everything arranged our way, she'll go to the small back room and that's it. At least she knows how to cook, I have to admit that. I save a lot of money not having to order food." The words were like knives. Each one penetrated deep into Mary Jane's chest, opening wounds she didn't even know existed. She squeezed the clothes in her hands so hard that her fingers turned white. Her breathing was difficult, trapped somewhere between her throat and her chest. "Oh, Gabriel. He doesn't care. Men never care about these things, right? He just wants ready food and clean clothes. He even finds it funny when I imitate his mother's way of speaking. Yesterday I imitated her offering food and he laughed so hard." Mary Jane couldn't move. She was frozen there, holding that T-shirt of Gabriel's, the same T-shirt she had carefully washed, attentively ironed, lovingly folded, and he was laughing at her. Her son, the boy she had raised alone, whom she had defended from everything and everyone, was laughing at her behind her back. Tears began to fall, silent, wetting the clothes she held. They weren't just tears of sadness, but of something deeper, more devastating. It was the pain of realizing that all her sacrifice, all her love, all her dedication had been useless. Worse than useless, they had been invisible. She remembered so many things at that moment. The night she came home from work with swollen feet and still made Gabriel's dinner. The times she went hungry so he could eat. The clothes she mended for herself while buying new clothes for him. The illnesses she ignored because she couldn't miss work, because she needed the money for his college tuition. All that, and now she was a laughingstock, a tolerated inconvenience, a tiresome old woman who would soon be pushed into a dark back room in her own house. "Look, I have to hang up. Gabriel must be arriving. We'll talk later, okay? Kisses, friend." Mary Jane heard Patricia hang up the phone and move around the living room. Quickly, she wiped her tears with the back of her hand and went back to folding clothes, trying to appear normal, trying not to show that her world had just collapsed. When she finished, she went to the kitchen and began to prepare dinner mechanically. She peeled potatoes, seasoned the chicken, chopped the vegetables. Every movement was automatic, performed by a body that functioned even when the soul was shattered. Gabriel arrived shortly after 7, tired as always. He threw his backpack on the sofa and went straight to his room, not even looking at his mother. Patricia followed him, and Mary Jane heard them talking softly, probably about their workday, about their wedding plans, about everything but her. During dinner, which she served at the table with her usual care, Gabriel and Patricia talked between themselves. Mary Jane ate in silence, each mouthful heavy as lead. She watched them, trying to understand when everything had changed, trying to pinpoint the exact moment she had lost her son. There had been signs before, she knew. Small things she had chosen to ignore. The time Gabriel cancelled her birthday lunch because he had a party with friends, the calls he didn't return, the visits that became rarer when he moved out. But Mary Jane always made excuses, always justified. "He's busy, he's building his life, it's normal," she told herself. But now there was no denying it. Her son didn't love her the way she loved him. Perhaps he never had. Perhaps all that love she had given had been wasted on someone incapable of reciprocating. "Mom, we're going out tomorrow. We'll be back late, so you don't need to. Make dinner for us." Gabriel's voice pulled her from her thoughts. She looked up and saw him looking at his phone as he spoke, without even facing her. "Okay, son. Oh, and on Saturday, people are coming over so we can show them the photos of the wedding buffet. Can you make those savory snacks you make? Everyone loved them last time." Patricia laughed, but it was a joyless, almost malicious laugh. "Yes, Mrs. Mary. Your savory snacks are the only good thing in this old house." The silence that followed was tense. Mary Jane felt something break inside her, a rope that had been stretched for too long. She looked at Patricia, really looked, and saw there a cruel, petty, mean woman. And then she looked at Gabriel, waiting, wishing he would say something, that he would defend his mother, that he would show a minimum of respect. But Gabriel just laughed, a low, almost imperceptible laugh, but one that Mary Jane heard clearly. Her son was laughing at the humiliation his fiancée had just inflicted on her. Something changed at that moment, something profound and irreversible. Mary Jane felt a coldness spread through her chest, as if her heart were freezing. It wasn't exactly anger, it was something calmer, more definitive. It was clarity. "I'll make the savory snacks," she said, her voice surprisingly firm. She got up from the table, collected the plates, and went to the kitchen. As she washed the dishes, she looked out the window at the city outside, at the lights of the buildings, at the life happening in thousands of apartments. How many women were going through the same thing as her? How many mothers were being scorned by the children they raised? How many were swallowing humiliations in silence, thinking it was their destiny, their obligation? That night, Mary Jane couldn't sleep. She lay in the dark, thinking about everything, thinking about her life, her choices, her sacrifices, thinking about what she had done wrong for her son to become that indifferent man. Or perhaps she had done nothing wrong, she thought. Perhaps she had just loved too much, given too much, nullified herself too much. There was a scarf kept in the dresser drawer, a hand-embroidered scarf she had received from Mrs. Stella, the employer she had worked for 20 years. The lady had passed away 5 years ago, but before that, she had given Mary Jane that scarf, saying it was for a special occasion. It was delicate, with tiny flowers embroidered on the edges, made with a care that was no longer seen. Mary Jane had thought of giving that scarf to Gabriel on his wedding day, as a symbol of her blessing. But now, holding the scarf in her hands in the dark of the room, she wondered if he deserved it. If he deserved anything she still had to give. Hours passed slowly. Mary Jane heard the sounds of the night, the cars outside, the wind in the trees, the breathing of the city. And within herself something was beginning to awaken. It wasn't exactly rebellion, it was something more essential. It was the instinct for survival, the basic desire to be treated with dignity, to be seen, to be respected. When the sun began to rise, Mary Jane had already made a decision. She didn't yet know exactly what she would do, but she knew she couldn't continue like this. She couldn't continue being invisible, being trampled, being treated as a nuisance in her own home. She got out of bed with new determination. She looked at herself in the mirror and saw a 73-year-old woman, tired, hurt, but still standing, still alive, still capable of fighting for herself. And that fight, she realized, was just beginning. The week passed in a strange haze for Mary Jane. She continued performing her daily tasks, but something inside her had changed. It was as if she were watching her own life from the outside, observing that woman who cleaned, cooked, and served without being noticed. Each time Patricia spoke to her in a condescending tone, each time Gabriel passed her without a glance, the wound deepened, but something new also strengthened, something she couldn't yet name. On Friday evening, Gabriel arrived home earlier than usual. He held a folder of documents and a smile on his face that Mary Jane hadn't seen in a long time. Patricia was already there, more dressed up than usual in a new dress Mary Jane didn't recognize. "Mum, sit here. We need to talk to you." The tone was too gentle, forced. Mary Jane felt a tightening in her stomach. She dried her hands on her apron and went to the living room, sitting in the armchair that had always been hers, the oldest one, faded on the sides. Gabriel and Patricia sat on the sofa side by side, their hands intertwined. They looked like a television commercial, Mary Jane thought, everything perfectly rehearsed. "Mum, we have some news. The wedding date is set." Gabriel spoke with enthusiasm, his eyes sparkling. Patricia smiled beside him, that smile that never reached her eyes when she looked at Mary Jane. "It's on August 15th. We got an incredible discount on the buffet because it was a cancelled date. The place is beautiful, Mum. It has a garden, a huge hall, all. Very sophisticated." "That's good, son. I'm happy for you." The words came out mechanically from Mary Jane's mouth. She should be happy, should be emotional about her only son's wedding. but all she felt was an immense emptiness, as if she were watching someone else's life. "And there's more, Mum. After the wedding, we're going to live right here. We've talked and decided it's best. That way we save up to buy our apartment in about 2 or 3 years." Mary Jane nodded, waiting for the rest. She knew there was more. It was Patricia who continued, her voice artificially sweet. "And you'll stay in the small back room, Mrs. Mary. We'll make it very pretty for you, I promise. It will be cozy. That way the large room is for us who need more space." The small back room, that room that barely had ventilation, where she kept boxes and unused objects. That would be her new room in her own house. Mary Jane looked at Gabriel, hoping he would say something, that he would soften it somehow. But he just nodded, smiling. "And another thing, Mom. We're going to need to do some renovations, paint, change some furniture. This sofa here is very old, these curtains too. Patricia has incredible taste in decoration. She'll make everything beautiful." Mary Jane looked around the living room. Every piece of furniture there had a story. The sofa had been bought with her first salary as a registered domestic worker 30 years ago. The curtains she had sewn herself, spending sleepless nights on a neighbor's borrowed machine. The wooden bookshelf had been a gift from Mrs. Stella, the employer who became a friend. Everything there was a part of her, her history, her life. "Are you going to throw everything away?" They're not throwing away, Mum. It's renovating. The house needs a new look. Besides, we thought it might be nice for you to contribute to the renovation. After all, you'll be living here too." Gabriel said this naturally, as if it were obvious, as if it were fair to ask her to pay for the renovation of her own house to suit someone else's taste. Mary Jane felt anger begin to boil inside, but she contained it. It wasn't time yet. "I'll think about it," was all she said. Patricia rolled her eyes, a quick gesture she thought Mary Jane wouldn't. "See? Oh, and Mom, at the wedding you'll sit at the table in the back, okay? It's just that Patricia's parents will sit at the main table, along with us and the bridesmaids' groomsmen. But you'll be there, we wouldn't forget about you." The back table. At her own son's wedding reception, she would be relegated to the back of the hall, far from the family, far from everything. Like a second-class guest, like someone whose presence was merely tolerated. Mary Jane slowly got up. Her legs felt shaky, but she forced herself to maintain an upright posture. "Excuse me, I'm going to finish making dinner." She went to the kitchen and closed the door. She leaned her hands on the sink and took a deep breath, trying to control the emotions that threatened to overflow. She looked at her hands, old and calloused, hands that had worked her entire life, hands that had washed, ironed, cooked, cleaned, hands that had cradled Gabriel as a baby, that had held him when he learned to walk, that had prepared thousands of meals for him. And now those hands trembled, not from weakness, but from a contained fury she had never known existed within her. Mary Jane opened the drawer where she kept important documents. The house deed was there inside a plastic folder yellowed by time. She took the document and held it carefully. That house was hers. She had bought it with money she had saved for years, working double shifts, saving penny by penny. It was the only asset she owned, the only material possession she had to leave as an inheritance to her son. But now, looking at that paper, she wondered if Gabriel truly deserved it. If he deserved to inherit the fruit of so much sacrifice after treating her that way, after allowing his fiancée to humiliate her, belittle her, turn her into a second-class citizen in her own home. She put the document back and returned to preparing dinner. But her mind was far away, processing, planning. A new sensation was settling in her chest, something she vaguely recognized as dignity, as self-respect, as the simple refusal to continue being trampled. During dinner, Gabriel and Patricia continued talking animatedly about the wedding plans, the dress Patricia had chosen, the invitations that were already being printed, the honeymoon they wanted to take in Cancun if they could, save enough money. Mary Jane listened to them in silence, eating little, observing much. She saw how Gabriel looked at Patricia with adoration. She saw how he laughed at all her jokes, even the unfunny ones. She saw how he touched her with tenderness, with attention, and she realized that she had never seen her son look at her that way, not even as a child. There had always been a distance, a coldness that she had attributed to his reserved personality. But now she understood that it wasn't reserve. It was indifference. After dinner, as she washed the dishes, Mary Jane heard Gabriel and Patricia laughing in the living room. Curious, she approached the door and saw them looking at a cell phone, watching a video. They were roaring with laughter, and Mary Jane felt a pang of something she took a moment to identify. It was exclusion. It was the pain of knowing that there was a whole life between them of which she was not a part, in which she was not desired. She returned to the kitchen and finished putting everything away. Then she went to her room and closed the door. She sat on the bed and stayed there in the dim light, thinking about everything she had given, everything she had lost, everything she still had ahead of her. She was 73, but she didn't feel old. Tired, yes. Hurt, certainly. But not old, not finished. There was still life in her. There was still will. And for the first time in decades, Mary Jane allowed herself to think about herself, about her desires, her needs, her rights. She took the embroidered scarf from the drawer again and held it against her chest. It was so delicate, so beautiful. Mrs. Stella had made it with such care. Her employer had been more of a mother to her than her own mother had managed to be, passing away when Mary Jane was only 15. Mrs. Stella had taught her so much about dignity, about valuing herself. Too bad Mary Jane had forgotten those lessons over the years, but she was remembering now. Slowly, painfully, but she was remembering. She put the scarf back and took an old notebook she had in the drawer. She opened it to a blank page and began to write. She noted down everything she owned, all her documents, or her rights. She also noted down phone numbers she thought she might need. She didn't yet know exactly what she would do, but she was preparing herself. She was arming herself for a battle she didn't even know she would fight. When she finally turned off the light and lay down, Mary Jane felt something strange. It was fear, yes, but it was also hope. The hope that perhaps it wasn't too late for her, that perhaps she could still regain her dignity, her respect, her own life. Outside, she heard the muffled sounds of Gabriel and Patricia watching television. She heard when they went to sleep, when the lights went out, and she stayed there awake in the dark, her eyes open, her mind working. Tomorrow would be another day. And Mary Jane was beginning to realize that days didn't all have to be the same, that she had choices, that she had power, that she had rights, and that she didn't have to accept being treated like trash in her own home, by her own son. Change was coming. Mary Jane could feel it, like a storm on the horizon, inevitable and necessary. And for the first time, in a long time, she wasn't afraid of the storm. She was waiting for it. The wedding day arrived wrapped in a warmth typical of a London August day. Mary Jane woke before dawn, as always, but this time with a different weight in her chest. Today was the day her only son would marry, and she had barely been included in the preparations. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind of activities from which she had been systematically excluded. Patricia and Gabriel decided everything themselves, sometimes commenting in passing about their choices, but never truly asking for her opinion. She got out of bed and went to the wardrobe. There was the dress she had chosen for the occasion, a simple navy blue dress she had found in a second-hand shop in the city centre. She had spent part of her small pension on it, but it was worth it. It was discreet, elegant in its own way, and in good condition. Mary Jane had spent hours caring for it, washing it delicately, ironing it carefully. She wanted to be presentable. She wanted her son to be able to look at her without shame. As she got ready, she picked up the embroidered scarf she had received from Mrs. Stella. Today was the day. She would give the scarf to Gabriel as her blessing, as a symbol of all the good she wished for him, despite everything. Despite the pain, despite the humiliation, he was still her son. And a part of her, that stubborn part that still held hope, believed that perhaps on that special day he would truly see her. That perhaps he would hug her, thank her for everything, show a little of the love she had always given him. Gabriel and Patricia had already gone to the wedding venue early. They left Mary Jane alone in the apartment, with instructions to arrive on her own at the agreed time. They didn't even offer to take her, although they were going in the same car that could easily fit 3 people. It was another sign, Another clear message that she was not a priority, not important. Mary Jane took a bus to the Mayfair district, where the venue was located. The journey took almost an hour, with the bus crowded and she standing for much of the way, holding her bag where she kept the precious scarf. When she finally got off at the stop, her legs ached and she was sweaty from the heat, but she took a deep breath, adjusted her hair, and walked the 2 blocks to the location. The venue was truly impressive. An old mansion renovated, with spacious gardens and sumptuous decoration. Mary Jane stood at the entrance for a moment, admiring it. Her son would marry there, in that beautiful place. She should be happy, she should be proud, but all she felt was an immense emptiness. She entered slowly, passing through the gardens where some guests were already gathering. No one greeted her. People talked in small groups, elegant in their party attire, and Mary Jane passed them like a ghost. She reached the main hall and stopped, looking for her seat. A young woman with a clipboard approached. "Are you a guest from the groom's side or the bride's side?" "From the groom's, I'm his mother." The young woman checked the list and frowned. "Ah, yes. You're at table 15, in the back. Follow this way." Mary Jane followed the indicated direction. Table 15 was literally in the furthest corner of the hall near the kitchen door. It was a small table with people she didn't know, probably distant acquaintances or colleagues. She sat down slowly, feeling the weight of humiliation. At the main table, decorated with expensive flowers and linen tablecloths, were the seats reserved for the newlyweds, Patricia's parents, the bridesmaids, groomsmen, places of honor, and she, the groom's mother, was relegated to the back, as if her presence were a necessary inconvenience. The ceremony began, and Mary Jane watched from afar. Gabriel entered the hall elegant in his new suit, smiling. He looked handsome, she thought, with a pang in her heart. So handsome and so distant. Patricia entered shortly after, in an elaborate white dress, holding her father's arm proudly. The bride was beautiful too, Mary Jane had to admit, but there was a hardness in her eyes that no makeup could hide. Throughout the ceremony, Gabriel did not once look to where his mother was sitting. His eyes were fixed on Patricia, in a mixture of love and devotion that made Mary Jane wonder if he had ever looked at her that way. Probably not. Probably never. The reception began after the ceremony. The tables were served with elaborate food. Champagne flowed freely. Music played loudly. Mary Jane ate in silence, trying to appear normal, trying not to let the pain she felt show. The people at her table talked among themselves, ignoring her completely. It was as if she didn't exist. It was then that she decided. She couldn't sit there invisible on her own son's wedding day. She needed at least to give her blessing, to give the scarf, to have that moment she had imagined. She slowly got up, picked up her bag, and began to walk towards the main table. Her heart pounded as she crossed the hall. Some people looked at her with curiosity. Others didn't even notice. Mary Jane held the scarf inside her bag, feeling the soft fabric between her fingers. She was nervous, but determined. It was her right as a mother to be there, to bless her son, to be part of that moment. When she got near the main table, Gabriel was laughing at something one of the groomsmen had said. Patricia was beside him, radiant, posing for photos. Mary Jane waited a moment, but they didn't notice her. She moved closer. "Gabriel, son." Her voice came out trembling but audible. Gabriel turned, surprised. For a second, Mary Jane saw something in his eyes, a shadow of recognition. But then Patricia also turned, and her face transformed into a mask of irritation. "Mrs. Mary, what are you doing here?" "I came to give my blessing. I brought a gift for Gabriel." Mary Jane began to take the scarf out of her bag, but before she could complete the gesture, Patricia abruptly stood up. Her eyes were cold, furious. "You shouldn't have left your seat. This is inappropriate." "But I just wanted to give this to my son. It's a scarf that—" Patricia didn't let her finish. With a quick and brutal movement, she pushed Mary Jane. The force of the push caught the elderly woman by surprise. She stumbled backward, trying to balance, but her feet tripped over her own dress. She fell to the floor with a dull thud, bringing down a tray a waiter was carrying. The sound of breaking crystal echoed through the hall. Glasses, plates, everything shattered on the floor in an explosion of noise. Mary Jane lay on the floor amidst the shards, her blue dress stained with champagne and food, the embroidered scarf still clutched in her hand. The entire hall fell silent. All conversations stopped. All music seemed to cease. Hundreds of eyes turned to the scene, to the elderly woman fallen on the floor, surrounded by debris. Mary Jane tried to get up, but her hands trembled, her body ached. She looked at Gabriel, waiting, pleading for him to help her, to say something. But Gabriel remained seated. He looked at his mother on the floor, at his wife beside him, and did not move. He did not extend a hand. He did not say a word. He just stayed there, paralyzed, as if that woman on the floor were a stranger, not the person who had raised him, who had given up everything for him. Patricia, for her part, smiled. It was a quick, almost imperceptible smile, but Mary Jane saw it. She saw the triumph in those eyes, the satisfaction of having put her mother-in-law in her place. Then Patricia waved to one of the staff. "Please, clean this up. What a mess." The words were cold, without a shred of remorse. Mary Jane felt tears burn her eyes, but refused to let them fall. Not there, not in front of everyone. With immense effort, she managed to get up alone. Her hands bled a little where the shards cut her. Her clothes were ruined. Her dignity was in tatters. She looked once more at Gabriel. Her son was looking at her now, but his eyes were empty. There was no love there, no guilt, nothing. And it was at that moment that Mary Jane fully understood. She understood that she had lost her son a long time ago. Perhaps she had never truly had him. She understood that all her sacrifice had been in vain, that all her love had been wasted. But she also understood something else. She understood that she didn't have to accept it, that she didn't have to continue being humiliated, being trampled, being treated like trash. Something inside her, which had been growing in recent weeks, finally exploded. It wasn't exactly anger. It was determination. It was the firm decision that it ended there, at that instant. Mary Jane put the scarf back in her bag. She would no longer give that gift. Gabriel didn't deserve it. She straightened up as best she could, ignoring the pain, ignoring the stares, ignoring everything. And she began to walk towards the exit, her head held high, her steps firm despite her trembling body. As she walked through the hall, she heard murmurs begin. People commented softly, shocked or judging. She didn't know. It no longer mattered. None of it mattered. She left the hall, crossed the gardens, passed through the gate. The rain began to fall, heavy and cold, wetting her already ruined dress. But Mary Jane did not stop. She kept walking, leaving behind that party, those people, that life. She was on the street when a man approached her. He was one of the waiters who worked at the venue, a young man with kind eyes. "Are you all right, ma'am? I saw what happened in there. It was horrible." Mary Jane looked at him, surprised by the kindness. It had been so long since anyone had shown real concern for her. "I'll be fine," she said, though she wasn't sure if it was true. The young man looked around and then spoke softly. "There's something you need to know. Some guests filmed what happened. The video is already circulating among the buffet staff. It shows everything, you being pushed, your son doing nothing. You have the right to know this. Perhaps you can use it somehow." Mary Jane felt something ignite within her. A video, proof, evidence of what had happened, of the humiliation she had suffered. And suddenly, she knew exactly what she needed to do. She knew she wouldn't let it go unpunished, that she wouldn't swallow this humiliation in silence any longer. "Thank you very much," she said to the young man, her voice firmer now. And she began to walk back home, in the rain, planning. Planning what she would do, how she would regain her dignity, how she would seek justice. The battle was just beginning, and Mary Jane, for the first time in 73 years, was ready to fight. Mary Jane returned home drenched by the rain, her navy blue dress clinging to her body, her shoes squelching with every step. She entered the empty apartment and went straight to the bathroom. She took off her wet clothes and stood under the hot shower for long minutes, letting the water wash away not just the dirt, but also part of the humiliation. But only part. The rest would remain there, etched in her memory, fueling something new that grew within her. After drying off and putting on an old nightgown, Mary Jane went to the kitchen and made some tea. She sat at the table with the warm cup in her hands and began to think, really think. The young man from the venue had said there was a video. That changed everything. It was no longer just her word against theirs. There was proof of what had happened, of how she had been treated. The next morning, Mary Jane woke with a clear purpose. She waited until 9 o'clock and then picked up the phone. There was a number she had kept for years, for a lawyer she had met through Mrs. Stella. The lawyer, Dr. Helen Carter, had an office that offered free consultations for low-income individuals. Mary Jane had never imagined she would need it, but now she was grateful to have kept the contact. "Hello, Dr. Helen Carter's office," a young voice said on the other end. "Good morning. My name is Mary Jane, and I would like to schedule a consultation with the doctor. It's about an urgent matter." After a few minutes of conversation, Mary Jane had an appointment scheduled for that same afternoon. She hung up the phone feeling something akin to hope for the first time in weeks. It wasn't revenge she sought, although there was a desire for justice burning in her chest. It was more than that. It was about regaining her dignity, about ensuring she would never be treated that way again. Gabriel and Patricia were still on their honeymoon. They had gone to Brighton, a 4-day trip that Patricia's parents paid for as a wedding gift. Mary Jane was alone in the apartment, and that solitude, which had once weighed heavily on her, now seemed like a blessing. It gave her the time and space needed to do what she had to do. In the afternoon, she took the bus to Dr. Helen Carter's office, located in the city centre. It was an old but well-maintained building, with a discreet sign at the entrance. Mary Jane climbed the 2 flights of stairs and entered the reception area. The young woman who had answered the phone greeted her with a gentle smile. "You must be Mrs. Mary Jane. The doctor is already waiting." She was led to a small but welcoming room. Dr. Helen Carter was a woman in her 40s, her hair pulled back in a bun, intelligent eyes behind thin-rimmed glasses. She rose to greet Mary Jane with a firm handshake. "Mrs. Mary Jane, welcome. Please sit down. Tell me what happened." And Mary Jane told her. She told everything from the beginning. The years of sacrifice, her son's growing indifference, Patricia's arrival, the humiliations, and finally the wedding day. As she spoke, tears began to fall, but her voice remained firm. When she finished, she felt strangely light, as if sharing that burden had relieved her a little. Dr. Helen Carter listened in silence, occasionally making notes. When Mary Jane finished, she was thoughtful for a moment. "Mrs. Mary, what you suffered is unacceptable. English law protects the elderly against abuse and mistreatment, and what happened to you clearly falls under that. You mentioned that there is a video of the incident?" "Yes, one of the buffet staff told me, but I don't have the video." "We will need to get that video. It is crucial. With it, we can prove what happened. Now, tell me, do you own the property where you live?" "Yes, the house is mine. I bought it with my own money. 20 years ago." Dr. Helen Carter nodded, writing something else. "Then we have a few options. First, we can file a police report against your daughter-in-law for assault. Second, we can take legal measures to protect your assets. You mentioned that your son and daughter-in-law plan to live with you and make renovations. It's important to ensure that the property remains yours and that your rights are respected." Mary Jane felt her heart quicken. For the first time, someone was on her side. Someone was saying that she had rights, that she could defend herself. "What do I need to do?" Dr. Helen Carter explained the process in detail. First, they would need to obtain the video. Then they would file the police report. As for the property, there was the option of making a donation with a life tenancy reservation to a charity, ensuring that Mary Jane could live there for the rest of her life, but that after her passing, the property would not go to Gabriel. There is a foundation here in London that works specifically with protecting vulnerable elderly people. If you donate the property to them with a life tenancy reservation, it guarantees that you will be protected and that the house will not be used by those who mistreated you. Mary Jane thought for a long moment. Was this what she wanted? To completely disinherit him? On the other hand, why did he deserve to inherit the fruit of so much of her suffering after treating her that way? "I want to do this," she finally said. "I want to protect what is mine and ensure that it is used to help other people like me." Dr. Helen Carter smiled, a sad but understanding smile. "I will help you, and I won't charge anything. Cases like yours are exactly why I opened this office." In the following days, Mary Jane and the lawyer worked intensely. They managed to locate the waiter who had mentioned the video. His name was Robert. He was 25 years old and studied law at night while working at events during the day. He was moved by Mary Jane's story and not only provided the video, but also offered to testify if necessary. The video was clear and devastating. It showed Mary Jane approaching the table, Patricia standing up and pushing her forcefully. It showed the fall, the broken glass, and even more painfully, it showed Gabriel sitting motionless, looking at his mother on the floor without doing absolutely anything. The video even captured Patricia's smile immediately after the incident. With the video in hand, they filed the police report. Mary Jane had to relive everything again when telling the officer, but she did it with her head held high. She was no longer a victim hiding in shame. She was a woman fighting for her rights. In parallel, Dr. Helen Carter prepared all the documents for the property donation. Mary Jane read each page carefully, making sure she understood everything. The foundation that would receive the donation was serious and well-established, using donated properties to temporarily house elderly people at risk and to fund awareness programs about elderly rights. "Are you sure about this, Mrs. Mary?" Dr. Helen Carter asked before she signed. "Once you sign, there's no turning back." Mary Jane thought of Gabriel. She thought of the baby he had been, the boy she had raised, the man he had become. She thought of everything she had given him and how he had reciprocated. She thought of the woman who had been allowed to push her, and the son who had sat watching. "I am sure." And she signed, every document, every page. When she finished, she felt something strange. It wasn't exactly happiness, but it was relief. It was the feeling of having taken control of her own life for the first time in decades. The documents were registered at the registry office the next day, all legal, all official. Mary Jane's house now belonged to the foundation, although she had a lifelong right to live there. Gabriel would inherit nothing. Patricia would not lay her hands on the property she coveted so much. Gabriel and Patricia would return from their honeymoon in 2 days. Mary Jane knew there would be confrontation, knew it wouldn't be easy, but for the first time she wasn't afraid. She had something she had never had before: dignity. She had the certainty that she had done the right thing. The night before their return, Mary Jane sat in the living room looking around. Everything was still the way it had always been. Her old furniture, her hand-sewn curtains, her memories in every corner. But something had changed. She had changed. She picked up the embroidered scarf, the one she had almost given to Gabriel at the wedding. She looked at it for a long moment, admiring Mrs. Stella's delicate work. Then she folded it carefully and put it back in the drawer. It wasn't for Gabriel. It never had been. It was hers, a reminder of someone who had truly loved and respected her. Mary Jane went to sleep early that night. Tomorrow would be a difficult day, but she was ready. For the first time in 73 years, she was truly ready to fight for herself. And as she slept, she dreamed. Not of the past or of sacrifices. She dreamed of the future, of possibilities, of a life where she would not be invisible, where she would not be trampled, a life where she would be seen, respected, valued. A life that was just beginning. Gabriel and Patricia arrived from their honeymoon on a sunny Friday afternoon. Mary Jane heard the key turning in the lock and felt her heart quicken, but she remained calm. She was sitting in the living room, simply but dignifiedly dressed, waiting. They entered carrying suitcases, tanned, smiling. The happiness on their faces seemed to falter for an instant when they saw Mary, Jane there sitting upright in the armchair, looking at them with an expression they couldn't decipher. "Hi, Mum," Gabriel said, dropping his suitcase on the floor. "The trip was great." "That's good," Mary Jane replied, her voice calm. Patricia didn't even bother to greet her. She went straight to the bedroom, probably to start unpacking. Gabriel followed her, but returned minutes later, looking bothered about something. "Mum, we need to talk about some things, about the house renovation, About the new furniture Patricia wants to buy. We can talk, yes, Mary Jane said. But first, there are other people who want to talk to you. As if on perfect cue, the doorbell rang. Gabriel frowned, confused. Mary Jane calmly got up and opened the door. Outside stood Dr. Helen Carter and a bailiff. Gabriel Santos? The official asked. That's me, Gabriel said, his voice hesitant. What's going on? Patricia came out of the bedroom, hearing strange voices. Her face paled when she saw the unfamiliar people in the living room. My name is Helen Carter. I'm a lawyer, and this is Officer Mark. We are here to deliver some documents and notifications regarding this property and a filed police report. Police report? Gabriel looked at his mother, incredulous. Mom, what have you done? What I had to do, son, protect my rights and my dignity. Dr. Helen Carter opened her folder and began to hand over the documents. First, a copy of the police report against Patricia for assault on an elderly person. Patricia snatched the paper from the lawyer's hand, her eyes scanning the lines, her face growing redder and redder. That's a lie! She fell on her own. She was disrupting the party. We have a video that proves otherwise, Dr. Helen Carter said calmly, and we have witnesses. You deliberately pushed Mrs. Mary Jane, causing her to fall and sustain injuries. This constitutes violence against an elderly person, as provided for in the older person's statute. Patricia was speechless for a moment, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Then she turned to Gabriel. Are you going to let your mother do this to me, to your wife? Gabriel seemed torn, looking between his wife and his mother. Mary Jane could see the conflict in his eyes, but she also saw something else, something that deeply disappointed her. He was calculating, thinking of himself, not the justice of the situation. Mom, this could ruin Patricia's life. You can't do this. She just pushed you. You weren't even seriously hurt. The words were like a slap in Mary Jane's face. She just pushed you. As if it were a minor thing, as if it didn't matter. As if publicly humiliating her, throwing her to the ground at his own wedding, was something that could be disregarded. I was hurt, Gabriel. I was hurt in ways you can't even see. But that's not all. Dr. Helen Carter handed over the second set of documents. These, for Gabriel. He took them with trembling hands and began to read. As he read, his face changed color, from confused to shocked, from shocked to furious. You donated the house? You donated my inheritance? It wasn't your inheritance, Gabriel. It was my property. Bought with my sweat, with years of work you never valued. And I decided to donate it to a foundation that will truly do something good with it. But where are we going to live? Patricia shrieked, her voice shrill. You can't do this. We have rights. You have no right over what is mine, Mary, Jane replied, her voice firm. I have a lifelong usufruct of this property. I can live here until the end of my days, but when I pass away, the house will go to the foundation, not to you. Patricia seemed about to explode. Her face was red, the veins in her neck bulging. She turned to Gabriel in fury. Do something. This house should be ours. We planned everything. And there it was, Mary Jane thought. The truth finally revealed. It wasn't love. It wasn't family. It was self-interest. They wanted the house. They wanted the assets. She, as a person, had never mattered. She was just an obstacle in their way. Gabriel, however, was silent. He looked at the documents, at his mother, at his wife. Mary Jane could see the calculations happening in his mind. She could see the exact moment he realized there was nothing he could do, that everything was legal, everything registered, everything finalized. It was the lawyer who broke the silence. There's one more thing you need to know. Mrs. Mary Jane has every right to reside here. You, on the other hand, no longer have that right. This property now belongs to the foundation, and Mrs. Mary is the only one with legal authorization to live here. If you attempt to continue living in this residence without her permission, you will be committing unlawful possession. In simple English, Dr. Helen Carter continued, if Mrs. Mary asks you to leave, you will have to leave, and if you don't leave voluntarily, she can seek a court order. The silence that followed was absolute. Patricia was white with rage. Gabriel seemed in shock. Mary Jane observed both of them, and for the first time in a long time she felt no fear, no guilt. She felt power. She felt that finally she had control of her own life. "I want you to leave," Mary Jane said, her voice calm but firm. "Take your things and leave my house." Patricia exploded. "You ungrateful old woman, after everything we planned to do for you. We were going to let you live in the small room. We were going to take care of you." "Take care of me?" Mary Jane felt a cold anger rise. "You were going to lock me in a windowless room while you renovated my house your way. You were going to use me as a maid, cook, cleaner. That's not caring, that's exploiting." "Mum," Gabriel finally spoke, his voice low, "we can talk about this. It doesn't have to be like this." But Mary Jane shook her head. "It had to be like this, son. It had to be exactly like this. You pushed me into a corner for years. You let your wife humiliate me, disrespect me. At your wedding, you sat watching while she threw me to the ground. And you did nothing. Nothing, Gabriel. You told me without words that I don't matter to you, so now I'm telling you don't live here anymore. Leave." Gabriel seemed about to say something, but Patricia pulled him by the arm. "Let's go. We're not going to stay here begging this bitter old woman. My parents will help us. We don't need her or her ugly old house." But Mary Jane saw the truth in Gabriel's eyes. She saw the despair, the realization that he had lost not just an inheritance, but something more. Perhaps a part of himself he didn't even know he had. Or perhaps, Mary Jane thought sadly, he had never had that part to begin with. They picked up a few suitcases and left, Patricia slamming the door shut. The silence that remained was immense. Mary Jane sat down again in the armchair, suddenly exhausted. Dr. Helen Carter sat beside her and took her hand. "You were very brave, Mrs. Mary." "I don't feel brave," Mary Jane admitted. "I feel tired and sad. Even after everything, he is my son." "I know. But you did the right thing. And who knows, with time, he may realize the mistake he made." Mary Jane wasn't sure about that. But she knew that even if Gabriel never realized, even if he never came back apologizing, she would be fine. Because for the first time in her life, she had chosen herself. She had chosen her dignity over the illusion of family she had been sustaining. Dr. Helen Carter and the bailiff said goodbye, leaving their contact information in case Mary Jane needed anything else. When she was alone, she walked to the window and looked out at the street. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink. It was beautiful, she thought. Life could still be beautiful. She thought of all the women like her, all the mothers who sacrificed and were forgotten, all the elderly women who were pushed into dark corners of their own homes. She thought about how important it was for them to know they had rights, that they could fight, that they didn't have to accept abuse. And she decided she would do something about it. She didn't yet know exactly what, but she would. Her story wouldn't end there. It would just be the beginning of something bigger. Mary Jane picked up the embroidered scarf from the drawer and held it against her chest. She thought of Mrs. Stella, who had always told her to be proud of herself, never to let anyone dim her light. It had taken decades, but she finally understood those words. And as night fell over London, Mary Jane felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. She felt peace, not a complete peace. There was still pain, still grief for the son she had lost, but it was a peace that came from knowing she had done the right thing, that she had defended herself, that she had regained her dignity, and that, she thought, was more valuable than any inheritance she could have left. 3 months had passed since Gabriel and Patricia left the house, 3 months in which Mary Jane had learned to truly live alone, not in the solitude imposed by others, but in the solitude chosen by herself. And she had discovered something surprising. She liked that life. The house was different now, not because it had physically changed, but because the energy was different. Mary Jane woke when she wanted, had coffee when she desired, watched her favorite shows without anyone complaining. More importantly, there was no longer that constant tension in the air, that fear of saying or doing something wrong, that feeling of always being in the way. One October morning, the doorbell rang. Mary Jane went to answer it and found Dr. Helen Carter at the door, accompanied by an older woman with grey hair and a gentle smile. "Mrs. Mary, this is Beatrice, president of the Elderly Support Foundation. She wanted to meet you personally." The two came in and sat in the living room. Mary Jane served coffee and biscuits she had made that morning. Beatrice accepted with a warm smile. "Mrs. Mary, first I want to thank you immensely for the donation. It's not every day that we receive such a well-located and well-maintained property. But more than that, your story deeply touched me." Mary Jane felt her cheeks warm. She wasn't used to positive attention. "I came here with a proposal," Beatrice continued. "The Foundation is starting a new project. We want to create support and awareness groups for elderly people in vulnerable family situations, and we would like you to be one of the speakers, sharing your experience." "Me?" Mary Jane was genuinely surprised. "But I don't know how to speak in public. I've never done anything like that." "You don't need to be a professional orator," Dr. Helen Carter said kindly. "You just need to tell your story. Show other people that they have rights, that they can defend themselves, that they don't have to accept abuse." Mary Jane remained silent for a moment, thinking. The idea scared her, but it also intrigued her. Could she make a difference? Could her pain, her suffering, serve to help other people? "I accept," she finally said. "If my story can help someone, then it's worth sharing." The first meeting took place 2 weeks later at a community centre in the Shoreditch borough. Mary Jane was nervous as she entered the hall where 15 elderly women awaited her. All had stories similar to hers. All had been belittled, ignored, mistreated by family members. She began to speak, and the words flowed more easily than she had imagined. She talked about her life, about the sacrifices, about Gabriel's indifference, about the humiliation at the wedding. And she talked about what she had done, about how she had decided to defend herself, to regain her dignity. The women listened in silence, many with tears in their eyes. When Mary Jane finished, an 80-year-old woman raised her hand. "How did you find the courage? I've been living with my son and daughter-in-law for 5 years. They treat me like a nanny to my grandchildren, with no right to rest or a life of my own. But I'm afraid of being alone, of having nowhere to go." Mary Jane looked at her with understanding. "I was afraid too, afraid of losing my son, afraid of being alone. But then I realized I was already alone. Having someone in your house who treats you badly is worse than being truly alone. And I discovered that we are not alone. There are laws that protect us. There are people willing to help. We just need to have the courage to ask for help." Another woman spoke, her voice trembling. "But what if my children never forgive me? What if I lose them forever?" This question hit Mary Jane deeply. It was the question she asked herself every night before falling asleep. "I don't know the answer," she admitted. "My son hasn't spoken to me since he left. It hurts. It hurts a lot. But I ask myself, what did I really lose? He was already not present in my life. He no longer respected me, no longer valued me." "Sometimes," Mary Jane continued, her voice choked, "we need to let go of people we love, even when it hurts, because loving cannot mean accepting to be destroyed. Loving cannot mean losing yourself." The silence that followed was heavy, but also comforting. All there understood, all shared that pain. After the meeting, several women came to speak with Mary Jane personally. One of them, Mrs. Constance, had a particularly touching story. She lived with her daughter and son-in-law who treated her like a nanny to her grandchildren with no right to rest or a life of her own. "I want to do what you did," Constance said, "but I don't know where to start." Mary Jane gave her Dr. Helen Carter's contact, and there, at that moment, she realized she had found a purpose. Her pain had not been in vain. She could use her experience to help other people. The following months were transformative. Mary Jane became a regular figure at the Foundation's meetings. Her story spread through the neighborhood, and soon women came looking for her, asking for advice, asking for help, simply asking to be heard. She began attending a craft group at the community center. She made true friendships for the first time in decades. She met Sebastian, a widower who lived in the neighboring building. They started having coffee together in the afternoons, talking about life, about books, about dreams they still had. It wasn't romance, it was companionship. It was having someone who valued her, who enjoyed her company, who made her laugh. Mary Jane discovered that she could be happy. that she deserved to be happy. One January afternoon, almost 6 months after the wedding, Mary Jane was on the balcony watering her plants when she saw a familiar figure standing on the sidewalk. It was Gabriel. He looked different, thinner, with dark circles under his eyes. He stood there for several minutes, just looking at the building, at the window where he knew his mother was. Mary Jane watched him, feeling a mixture of emotions: pain, longing, anger, sadness, all at once. Gabriel seemed about to enter the building, took a few steps towards the gate, but then he stopped, shook his head, and turned away, leaving. She didn't call him. A part of her wanted to. That part that was still a mother, that still loved the boy he had been. But the stronger part, the one that had learned to value herself, knew that it wasn't time. If Gabriel wanted to return, it would have to be of his own free will. He would have to come with humility, with recognition of his mistake. And she didn't know if he was ready for that. That night, Mary Jane took the embroidered scarf from the drawer once more. She looked at it for a long moment, at the delicate work, at the memories it carried. And then, for the first time, she tied it around her own neck. It wasn't for Gabriel. It had never been for Gabriel. It was for her, a symbol of her own rebirth, of her own strength. The following month, the foundation organized a larger event, a seminar on elderly rights. Mary Jane was invited to give a testimony on stage to an audience of over 100 people. She was terrified, but also determined. She walked onto the stage with trembling legs, but with her head held high. She looked at the audience and saw so many faces, so many stories, so much shared pain, and she began to speak. She told her story once more, but this time with more strength, with more clarity. She spoke about the importance of knowing one's own rights, of not being afraid to ask for help, of understanding that respect is non-negotiable, even when it comes from family. When she finished, the applause was deafening. People stood up. Some cried. Mary Jane felt tears in her own eyes, but they were different tears from those she had shed months ago. They were tears of liberation, of purpose found, of life regained. After the event, a young journalist approached. "Mrs. Mary, I would like to do an article about you for the local newspaper. Your story needs to be known by more people." Mary Jane agreed. The article was published 2 weeks later with the title, "From Humiliation to Dignity: The Story of Mary Jane." The text was respectful, focused on the rights of the elderly and the importance of reporting abuse. It included information about the foundation and how to seek help. The repercussions were unexpected. Mary Jane began to receive letters, messages, calls. People thanking her for having the courage to speak, people asking for advice, people sharing their own stories. She was no longer alone, and more importantly, she was making a difference. One evening, while preparing dinner, her phone rang. It was a number she didn't recognize. She answered cautiously. "Hello? Mom." Gabriel's voice made her heart stop. She said nothing, just waited. "Mom, I read the newspaper article. I saw the wedding video that went viral online. I understood what I did to you. And Mom," his voice was choked, "I apologize. From the bottom of my heart, I apologize." Mary Jane closed her eyes, feeling tears begin to fall. Part of her wanted to forgive him immediately, hug him, go back to being a mother as she always had been. But the stronger part knew it couldn't be that simple. "Gabriel, I thank you for the apology, but words are not enough. You hurt me deeply. You let them humiliate me, disrespect me. You sat watching me fall and did nothing. Nothing, Gabriel. You told me without words that I don't matter to you." "I know, Mom. I know. And I will carry that guilt for the rest of my life. Patricia and I broke up. She showed who she really was after. We lost the house. I was an idiot, a horrible son. But I want to try to fix this if you give me a chance." Mary Jane took a deep breath. "I don't know if we can go back to being what we were, Gabriel. Maybe we shouldn't even. But I can try to forgive you, in time. If you truly change, if you show it through actions, not just words. I will show you, Mom. I promise I will show you." They talked for a few more minutes. It wasn't a magical reconciliation. It didn't erase the pain. But it was a beginning, perhaps. A possible way back, not to what they were, but to something new, something healthier, built on mutual respect. When she hung up, Mary Jane stood in the kitchen for a long moment. She didn't know if Gabriel would truly change, if she could completely forgive him. But she knew one thing: she would survive either way, because she no longer depended on him to be happy, to have purpose, to feel valuable. She had built a new life, a life where she was respected, where her voice mattered, where she made a difference. Gabriel could be part of that life or not. The decision would be his, but the life was hers. Mary Jane went to the hallway mirror and looked at herself. She saw a 74-year-old woman with wrinkles that told stories, with eyes that had seen much pain, but also much victory. She saw a survivor, a fighter, a woman who had found her voice after decades of silence. And she smiled. A true smile from someone who finally was at peace with herself. Outside, the city continued its frantic rhythm. London never stopped, never slept. And Mary Jane, who for so long had felt invisible in that immense city, now knew she had her place. Small perhaps, but significant, helping other people, sharing her story, making a difference one life at a time. She picked up the embroidered scarf and placed it over her shoulders. She looked out the window at the city lights and thought of all the women out there who still suffered in silence, who still felt worthless, voiceless. And she made a silent promise to continue fighting for them, to continue sharing her story, to continue showing that it is never too late to regain one's dignity. Because in the end, Mary Jane realized it wasn't about the house, it wasn't about the inheritance, it wasn't even about Gabriel. It was about her, about valuing herself, respecting herself, loving herself, and that no one could ever take from her again. Life, Mary Jane had realized, had not ended at 73 when her son humiliated her. In fact, in some ways, it had only just begun, and she was ready to live it every day with the dignity and respect she had always deserved. Dear listeners, we hope that Mrs. Mary Jane's story has touched your hearts and sparked important reflections on dignity, respect, and self-worth. If this narrative resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of the emotional stories we bring. Leave a like if Mary Jane's journey inspired you, and tell us in the comments, do you know anyone who has gone through a similar situation? How can we, together, create a society that is more respectful of our elderly? Your stories and opinions are important to us. Every day we bring narratives that explore the complexities of life, the challenges of family relationships, and the incredible strength of the human spirit. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message of hope and empowerment. Until the next story, and remember, it's never too late to regain your dignity and live with respect.